All right, welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into a really fascinating investigation by the platform Halal Radar. And we're looking at a childhood classic, Hubba Bubba. Now, as you'll see, the investigation reveals something pretty surprising. The exact ingredient responsible for those massive, iconic bubbles, the gum base. Yeah, that's actually the ingredient that tells us the absolute least about what's inside.
So that brings us to the core question driving this entire investigation. It's simple to ask, but man, is it complex to answer. Is Hubba Bubba Gum considered halal, or is it haram? Well, the source points out a really important distinction here. While most of us just see this bright pink, sweet-smelling candy, Islamic dietary standards require us to look way past the marketing. Halal Radar notes that food in Islam is judged strictly by its ingredients, its sourcing, and the manufacturing process. It's really about looking under the hood.
To get to the bottom of this, the investigation kicks off with the standard ingredient list for Hubba Bubba Original, and it includes the usual suspects you'd expect, right? Sugar and corn syrup. But then we hit things like gum base, glycerol, various natural and artificial flavors, soy lecithin, artificial sweeteners, colors like red 40, and BHT to maintain freshness. So there is a whole lot going on there.
Now, according to the report, the very first concern for a lot of Muslim consumers is gelatin, specifically whether there's pork gelatin involved. But interestingly enough, the investigation highlights that gelatin is actually not listed in the standard original ingredients. So that clears up that initial worry right off the bat. But the second concern? It's definitely trickier. Let's talk about glycerol. Halal Radar explains that glycerol can come from a few different places. It can be plant-based, it can be synthetic, or it can be derived from animal fat. Now, while modern candies do often use vegetable or synthetic sources, a strict halal check requires absolute certainty. If it's plant-based, you're totally fine. But if it's animal-derived without certification, that becomes a major problem. Okay, moving on to the third red flag in this investigation, natural and artificial flavors. This label is notoriously opaque. It's essentially a giant umbrella term. The source notes that flavor carriers or processing aids can sometimes actually involve alcohol. And without a proper halal certification, that lack of transparency is a huge concern. Which brings us to the fourth concern, and back to that super mysterious gum base. The investigation notes that this is usually a proprietary blend. Think polymers, resins, and waxes. And while it is rarely pork or gelatin, the fact that it's proprietary means the specific sub-ingredients are totally hidden from the public. Because of this, Halal Radar argues you literally cannot just assume it's halal certified. And this leads us to one of the absolutely crucial takeaways from the source: global variations. Hubba Bubba is sold all over the world, and the ingredients and processing aids can actually change depending on the country you're in. So one regional version might be perfectly acceptable, while another version sitting on a shelf halfway across the world might contain a completely questionable components. So, with all of these moving parts in mind, from those proprietary gum bases to global ingredient shifts, what is the actual Islamic ruling concluded by the investigation? Let's dive into it. The report concludes that, while the label doesn't show clearly haram ingredients like pork gelatin, the lack of a universal halal certification and the opacity of ingredients like glycerol and flavorings just make things way too murky. Therefore, Halal Radar states that the safest ruling for practicing Muslims is simply not to treat all Hubba Bubba products as automatically halal. The source really emphasizes why this specific level of scrutiny is applied. You see, Islamic dietary laws don't just focus on the final product sitting in your hand. They actually require an understanding of where the food comes from, exactly how it's manufactured, and what processes it goes through to get to you. So, what's the official final verdict from the investigation? Well, Halal Radar advises consumers to simply avoid the product. Because these key ingredients require verified sourcing, they conclude it just cannot be consumed with complete confidence unless you do some further checking.
However, the investigation does provide some great actionable steps if this is a product you really want to consume. First, they recommend checking the exact packaging in your specific country for a recognized halal certification symbol. If there isn't one, they advise taking the next step and contacting the manufacturer directly.
And if you do reach out to the company, the source suggests asking 3 very specific questions to get to the bottom of it. 1. Is the glycerol plant-based or synthetic? 2. Are the flavors entirely alcohol-free in the final product?
And 3, is the proprietary gum based completely free from animal-derived ingredients?
Ultimately, Halal Radar advises that if the manufacturer's answers are unclear, it is best to just leave it and opt for certified alternatives. They sum up their stance with this really strong statement: protecting your deen is worth more than a sweet bubble.
At the end of the day, the goal of this Halal Radar investigation is to make these hidden supply chain questions visible. It's about allowing consumers to make choices with true confidence and peace of mind based on their dietary laws. It's a genuinely fascinating look at how complex modern food manufacturing can be, even for something as simple as bubblegum. And it really leaves you with a thought. How many proprietary ingredients are hiding in the everyday foods sitting in your pantry right now?